Hey everybody, it's Ron from Pick Dawgz, and this is Ron's Bake Shop Breakdown. We're going to go over 5 college basketball games for Tuesday, January 24th, 2023. Now, if you like what you see, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to put your college basketball picks in the comments section below. And if you're looking for my best bets, including my $15 daily Bank Shop Best Bet in College Hoops, you can find those at the Premium Picks tab at pickdawgz.com. Alrighty, let's get into it. Here are the games for Tuesday in college basketball. First up, we go to the Big 12 as Oklahoma takes on TCU. This one, 8 o'clock Eastern on ESPN+. You know, TCU, I think it's safe to say this is a much different team than the team that lost to Northwestern State back at the beginning of the season. TCU's in great form right now. You know, they've lost a few games in conference play, but this is a very competitive Big 12 conference. They've also taken down some tough teams, and they've beaten them by good margins. We saw last time out against Kansas, a true road game for TCU. They win that game by 23 points, 83-60. A couple games ago, they beat Kansas State by 14 points at home. And I just don't like the current form that Oklahoma's offense is in right now. When you look at the fact that they've lost 3 of their last 4 games, their last 2 games straight, and they only scored 56 points against Oklahoma State. They scored 60 points against Baylor. I just don't think Oklahoma's competitive enough on offense to keep this game close. You know, TCU is very tough to beat at home. Their offense, I think, is underrated still. Even though TCU has a great record this season at 15-4, they're 4-3 in conference play, they're ranked inside the AP top 15. I think there's still some more room for positive regression for TCU's offense. This is a team that's shooting 335th ranked in three-point shooting. I think those numbers are going to sharpen up. This is a pretty good shooting team that's getting pretty good looks. They take care of the basketball, good offensive rebounding team. They get to the free throw line, and I think TCU is going to win this game going away. We're only laying, a pretty decent, I think this price is actually pretty decent for us with the Horned Frogs. So I'm going to take TCU and lay the points in this one. Next up, we go to the MAC Conference as Eastern Michigan takes on Toledo. This one's going to be 7 o'clock Eastern on ESPN+. I do think Eastern Michigan is in trouble in this game and going forward, as when you look at the current form this team's in on both sides of the ball, and then you add to the fact that there's some injury concerns. We saw some really concerning numbers in the last game against Northern Illinois. Not only was it a 21-point blowout loss, 88 points you give up to the 300th ranked KenPom team in Northern Illinois, but you also have guys like Imani Bates only playing 18 minutes in that game, Yusuf Jihan only playing 13, Orlando Lovejoy only played 7 minutes in that one. You were already out a starter going into that game, and now your offense has scored under 70 points in 3 straight games. Your defense is really getting torched. You look up the game against Western Michigan, giving up 85 points, against Akron, 104 points allowed, and like I just mentioned, 88 allowed to Northern Illinois of all teams. Now you go on the road against the best offense in the conference in Toledo, a team that's ranked 12th in the country in adjusted offensive efficiency, very good shooting team that takes care of the ball and plays at a very fast pace. Yes, Toledo doesn't really worry about the defensive end, but they could score 100 points in this game, and I would not be surprised. And if they do get 100, I think they're going to be able to cover the number, even though it's a big number in this one. I lean towards the over, but it's going to be a very steep total, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this total keep climbing. But I'm going to lay the points here with the Toledo Rockets. I just don't like the current form that Eastern Michigan is in. Next up, we go to the ACC as Miami takes on Florida State. This one's going to be 7 o'clock Eastern on ESPNU. Now, when you look at Florida State going 1-8 in non-conference play, losing some games to teams that you would expect the Seminoles to beat most seasons, teams like Stetson, Troy, and Siena, but then you look in conference play, they're now 5-4. You may say, are things turning around here for Florida State's program this season? But I'd be careful with that. I mean, when you look at the wins that they have in conference play, they started the season, their first win in the ACC was against Louisville. And I mean, who hasn't beaten Louisville this season? They won that game by 22 points, but Louisville's ranked 296th right now in KenPom, so not a very impressive win in my opinion. Then your next conference win was against Notre Dame, and this is a down year for Notre Dame, so much so that Mike Bray has announced that he's not going to be on the head coach for the program going forward after this season. So, yes, you beat Notre Dame, but I'm still not impressed with that victory, and you beat him again later on for your third ACC win back on January 17th. You look at their next win against Georgia Tech on January 7th. Another team that's ranked outside the top 100 in KenPom. You beat them at home by 11 points, but I'm still not going to be ready to say, this is a contender in the ACC. And you beat, like I said, you beat Notre Dame again, and your final win in the ACC thus far was against Pittsburgh. Yes, it's an impressive win on paper, but this was a Pittsburgh team not expected to do too much this season going into the year. On paper, it wasn't a great roster. So yes, it's an impressive win. It's a top 70 KenPom win, but I'm still not sold on this Florida State team. I don't think that they're ready to turn around completely, and now you have a very tough matchup, one of the toughest matchups you've had all year in conference play against a Miami team that showed they can compete with some of the more physical teams in the conference. Yes, they lost last time out against Duke, but it was only a 2-point game. They covered the number in the end, and I was really worried about Miami's rebounding numbers going into that game. This is a Miami team doesn't really play very well in the defensive glass. They're ranked 319th in defensive rebounding, but Duke, although they had 16 offensive rebounds in that game, Miami chipped in 13 themselves. So we saw Miami was able to play physical. They had a great night shooting the ball, 10 of 21 from 3, 47%. We're used to seeing those kind of numbers from Miami, as they're a very good shooting team that shoots basically anywhere on the court. But, I do think that Florida State's, this is just a bad matchup here for the Seminoles. I think they've benefited from a very weak conference schedule thus far. When you look at this game and you look forward, you get Clemson, NC State, then you play Louisville again, but then you get Syracuse, Pittsburgh, and Clemson again. I think that Florida State will be 6-10 in conference play by Valentine's Day, so I don't like this spot here for Florida State. I'm going to take Miami. I'm going to lay the points with the better team. Next up, we go to the SEC as LSU takes on Arkansas. This one is going to be a 7 o'clock Eastern start time on ESPN2. It's a revenge game here for Arkansas, who lost to LSU back on December 28th, and it was the last win that LSU had in conference play, as they started 1-0 in SEC, and then they've lost their last 6 games in the conference, and their last 5 games were by double digits. They lost to Texas A&M by 13, Florida by 11, 106 to 66 to Alabama. They lost 67-49, an 18-point loss to Auburn, and then 21 points last time out against Tennessee in their most recent home game. So I don't like the current form LSU's in. I think their offense has become way too one-dimensional, and we're seeing them struggle to put points on the board. Their defense has not been much better, and now you got a revenge-minded Arkansas team who also went on a little bit of a losing streak. They lost 4 straight games to Auburn, Alabama, Vanderbilt, and Missouri. They just snapped that losing streak, and they looked pretty good doing so against Ole Miss, a 12-point win in that game. And I do think Arkansas is the much better team in this one, playing with revenge. LSU's in bad form, and we're not laying too crazy of a number with the Razorbacks at home. I think they win this one going away. I'm going to lay the points here with Arkansas. Next up, we see DePaul and Georgetown. This one's 7 o'clock Eastern on Fox Sports 1. I do think there's some value on the under in this game, and it's not easy to take unders with Georgetown this season. This is a very bad defense, especially in the conference. We've seen them give it up 90-plus points to teams in the Big East. We've seen them give up 80-plus most nights. But in this game, I think we're going to see this one go under the number. The first time these teams played was back on December 29th. It was an 83-76 final score in favor of DePaul. So a very high-scoring game. 159 points. Is it very high scoring for most teams in college hoops? Yes. It's basically a typical Thursday afternoon for Georgetown. So, nothing too extraordinary in that game. We've seen 102 to 89, 95 to 82 for Georgetown this season. So I would say it's about an average game for Georgetown in the conference. But in that game, it wasn't average shooting numbers, that's for sure. Both teams shot 50% from 3. Georgetown 7 of 14, DePaul 11 of 22. Both teams are, DePaul's a solid three-point shooting team. They're 95th ranked in three-point shooting, but they shoot 35.4% overall this season. They shot about 15% better in that game from the perimeter than they do overall this season. Georgetown about 19% better in that game than overall. So both teams had very, very good shooting nights, and the score was 83-76. Not a crazy high-scoring game like we would need to get over this total in this game. So I do think there's value on the under for that. When you look at last year's games between these two teams, we saw a very similar result in the first game between DePaul and Georgetown back on February 9th. It was an 82-74 final score. Pretty darn similar to the first game we saw this season, and we saw both teams in that game shoot 40+% from 3. Georgetown 12 of 27, 44.4%. We saw DePaul 9 of 22, 40.9%, much better than their season averages. Then the second game comes around. Both of these teams are familiar with each other defensively. A much, much, much low-scoring game, 68-65 the final. Both teams shoot under 30% from the perimeter. A very low-scoring defensive battle, and that was only a couple weeks after the first time around. I know this is a pretty confusing video, but I do think because of the outstanding shooting performances we saw in Game 1 of this series, the total is inflated. Add to the fact that Georgetown's defense is notoriously bad, the total is inflated even more so. Give me the under in DePaul, Georgetown. I lean towards Georgetown as well in the terms of the against the spread, but give me the under in this one. And that's it. Those are the games for Tuesday in college hoops. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to leave that like and subscribe, and don't forget to put your college basketball picks in the comment section below. Again, if you're looking for my best bets, you can find those at Pickdawgz Premium. As always, this is Ron Romanelli. Good luck.